Hello. In this video, I'm going to show you how to add the footings and the bearing wall to our foundation plan in the Jefferson Beach Bungalow project. So to start off with, I'm going to show you in a more of a graphical context. This is what we completed at the end of the last video. So what we're going to go ahead and add first off is the footings. So we have what we call continuous footings that come around all of the foundation walls. We also have a continuous footing. We'll refer to this as a interior footing that our bearing wall will rest on. And by bearing wall, I mean a wood-framed wall. So just to give you a little bit of an example, that's more or less how that bearing wall is intended to be framed. We also have these three isolation footings that will need to be added as well. So at the end of this video, in your foundation plan view, those will be the items that will have been added. So starting off, let's take a look at our foundation plan. So like we talked about in the last video, we have our callouts or our marks. So we created the concrete walls 2 and the concrete walls 1 in the last video. This time we'll create the concrete walls F1s and the F2s. The F1s are the footings that go underneath the garage. And if you take a look right here, there is an F1 footing that is underneath that bearing wall in the center of the structure. We're going to go back up here to our schedule, and our F1 footings are 12 inches by 8 inches, and our F2 footings are 16 inches by 8 inches. So we'll need to create those two footings to begin with. So back here in Revit, I'm going to go to my wall type. Now really quickly, Revit does under structure, it does have a continuous footing component that is a structural in nature. I'm not going to choose to use that in this specific model. And in fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create my footings using just a basic wall type. Okay, so moving ahead here, we are going to go ahead and I'm going to select and see if I have any type of footing, which I do not believe I have in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to simply do just stay on my foundation 6-inch wall, and I'm going to go edit type, and I'm going to duplicate this. And what I'm going to do is instead of foundation, I'm going to change that description to footing. And this is going to be, I'm going to start with my 16-inch wide footing. And we'll just leave that as concrete. All right, now I'll go ahead and say okay. And the only other thing I'll need to do here after it renames it, and I will have an actual type that will say footing 16-inch concrete. I will go to my edit, and my width on here is going to be 16 inches. I can key that in as either 0 space 16, or I can go 1 foot 4 inches, which will convert that to feet and inches. All right, so once I've done that, what I will do this time is, I've got actually a couple things I need to make sure I do here. So the first thing is I want to make sure that my location line, instead of the face of core or the core face, I want to drop my footings to the wall center line. So this is a T foundation system. And if we look at this, basically our wall is dead center on that footing. So we want to drop those footings underneath that on the center line. But before I go ahead and drop these footings in here, I need to make sure that my constraints are correct. So first off, my base constraint is going to be top of footing. The only problem that I have right now is the top of footing is the top of this element that I'm inputting here, and so what we need to do is we need to actually push it down. So what we're going to do first off is I'm going to come down here to my unconnected height. So this will be how thick my footing is, which is 8 inches. So I type 0 space 8 to get the correct syntax. And then on my base offset, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go negative 0 feet 8 inches, and that will offset my footing down 8 inches with an 8-inch height, and that essentially tricks Revit into making the top of this assembly at that elevation that we desire. So once I've done that, I'm going to simply come in here and I'm going to click my endpoint, and I'm going to come over here. Now, when I click here, we're going to actually see a problem, I believe. So I'm going to double click there and end, and I should have an error that pops up. And I do. So down here it says, none of the created elements are visible in floor plan, top of footing view. This is a view range error that I have. So I'm going to go ahead and hit escape twice. And I'm going to make sure I'm just clicked into the main view area. So in my properties window, I'm going to scroll down quite a ways, close, about probably 2/3 to 3/4 of the way down, and we'll see view range. I'm going to go ahead and edit that view range. And what we're going to see here is that the associated view range is top of footing. And then basically that 7'6" means that you're basically 7'6" above looking down with a 4-foot cutting plane. So what that basically means is that horizontal cutting plane is at 4 feet above this footing, which is not going to cut it for us. So what we're going to do here is we're going to change our view depth. I'm going to change that to a negative 0-2 inches. So what that basically is going to do is say I'm looking 2 inches below the top of the footing. And I'm going to try to apply that. I believe I'm going to get an error here. No, I did not. Okay, so what you'll see here is now my footing is actually visible. So I'm going to go ahead and say, okay, go back to my wall type. I'm still on my 16-inch footing. And now I'm just going to come to the center where the two walls meet. And once again, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go around until I meet back up to where that footing is. All right, so that will take care of the 16-inch footing. Now what we have to do is add our footings that's going to go around the garage wall. So first off, we're going to need to create a new footing, the F1, which is 12 inches wide. So I'm going to go ahead and select my wall type. It comes up as footing 16-inch. I'm going to do an edit type. I'm going to duplicate this, change that to 12 inches since that will be the width. Get rid of that additional 2 on the end, say okay. Under my edit, I'm going to change that to 1 foot 0 inches or 0 space 12 inches. Again, doesn't matter. Go ahead and say okay. Okay, one more time. Now I need to scroll back up in my properties window. I need to make sure that my constraints are still correct. So I want top of footing constraint. My base offset is a negative 8 inches, and I need my unconnected height 8 inches. So it looks like we're still good there. Okay, so on this particular one, I'm going to actually start my footing without connecting to the other footing. I'm just going to leave a little bit of space there, and I'll come back and show you why in 1 second. So I'm going to start there. Again, I'm on the wall center line as far as my location line's concerned. I'm going to come around to each of these corners, and then I'm going to return I don't need to go all the way. I want to come to the edge of that existing footing, and I'm going to double click right there. Okay, so the reason I didn't want to pull this or connect this all the way to the other footing, you'll see that this footing does not line up on the same plane as this footing here. Let me come back to this model right here, and what we'll see is we want that footing to carry on all the way through along that same plane, and then it will come and make that corner right there. What you'll notice here, it might be a little hard to see, but this little 6-inch wall segment is not perfectly centered on this continuous footing. And that is okay. There's not a problem with that. So going back to one of the commands I taught you in the previous video, I've got this footing selected. So we are in the edit mode of our walls. I'm going to come up here to my align tool, and I'm going to select the outside edge of that footing. That's what I want to align this footing to. Remember, you select what you want to align to first. So I'm going to select right there. It will now line up, and so my final step is just to make that wall long enough so it now connects. So you can see that we have those footings all connected. This little wall segment does not sit perfectly centered on that footing, but that's the nature of how that needs to be. All right, so one last footing we need to put in, and that's our interior footing. So to do that, I'm going to come back up here to architecture, to wall, and we already have our 12-inch footing. If I go back to our plan that we're working off of, remember that we have the type F1 right here. So that 12-inch footing is what we want here. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to find the midpoint, and I'm going to go ahead and select there. I should have made sure before I did that my constraints are all correct, but looking over here, they are. So top of footing, -8-inch base offset, and then the top constraint is unconnected. So I'm going to go ahead and bring that footing all the way over and connect that. Hit escape twice to exit out of that tool mode. I do want to do one last quick thing here. And again, if I go back to my plan, what we'll notice is we've got a 24-foot wide building from edge of foundation wall, which is the distance of our two grid lines. And what we'll note is this footing that we just put in there, it doesn't have a dimension. It just simply says it is equal spaced on each side. So we can do the math very quickly in our head right here and say, okay, we got 24 total inches, so if this, or 24 total feet. If this is equal distance, then that center line should be 12 feet and 12 feet. So I'm going to check that by coming up here to my annotate tab, go select my align dimension, and then I'm going to select my edge of foundation wall to the center of my footing and come back out here to the edge of my wall. Now, it was really interesting. I'm not quite sure how this happened, but we're not quite there. So there's a couple things that I can do. I could come in here and I could just simply select that footing, and then I could come in here and key in 12 foot, and that would shift things both ways. The other thing that can be done, you may have noticed before I went to that mode when my dimension was still highlighted, you will see this EQ with the line crossed out. I'm going to select that very quickly, and you'll see that my dimensions just changed to equal. That's how that dimension was made in that previous or on our floor plan. If I now actually toggle off of that, note that it moved it, and now that I'm not showing the equal, it's actually showing the two dimensions, and they are both equally those 12 feet. So that's a little trick you can sometimes do also to center things. instead of going and highlighting and then keying in the dimension. Okay, so we've got a couple more things here I want to take us through. So we do have some isolation footings. That is the two F3 footings and the F4 footing right here. Really quickly, if I come up here, that F3 is a 12 by 12 by 8 inches thick, and then we have a 24 inch by 24 inch by 8 inch thick. So what we need to do is we need to put those two footings in. So to do that, we are going to actually use a structural component this time. So I'm going to come over here to my structure tab, and on my structure tab, you will see this tool that's called isolated. Okay, this is our isolated footing. I'm going to click on that, and it's going to tell me immediately that I do not have any families loaded in there. So do I want to load one? I'm going to go ahead and say yes. That will automatically take me to my Imperial Library. I'm going to come down to structural foundations, and I'm going to see right here at the top there's a rectangular footing. You can see this preview area that it'll show that shape. So I'm going to go ahead and hit open. That will load that footing into my project. And as soon as that loads up over here in the properties window, you will see that information show up. Once that information shows up, we will need to look at our footing. Looks like we've got a 72 inch by 48 inch by 18 inch. Okay, we want a 12 inch by 12 inch by 8 inch and then a 24 by 24 by 8 inch. So let me just click on the drop down menu here. We do not have anything else of that type. All right, so we're going to go ahead and I'm going to hit edit type, and I'm going to duplicate this. So the first one I'm going to create is my 12 inch by 12 inch by 8 inch footing. I'm going to go ahead and say okay. And then right here under our parameters and our values, we need to put in our foundation thickness. That is going to be our 8 inches. And then in this case, it is, even though it says rectangular, we can create a square by putting in 12 inches. I need to go 0, 12 by 12 inches. All right, so now that I've got that done, I'm just going to go ahead and say okay. And I'm not going to worry exactly at the location. I do need to make sure, though, that my constraints over here are set correctly. So I've got the top of footing, height offset from level. Once again, no, if I remember correctly, on the foundation, this automatically forces it down. We'll check this in just a minute. So I'm going to go ahead and just click once, drop that footing in. I'm going to click twice, drop that footing in. We also have that third footing that is our 24 by 24 inch. I'm going to come over here to edit type, duplicate. Very quickly, I'm going to create a 24 inch by 24 inch by 8 inch footing. I need to change that to 24 inches or 2 foot by 2 foot on my width and my length. I'm going to go ahead and say okay, and really quickly I'm going to go ahead and drop that in. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my 3D tab here really quickly. If I look at that, I can tell that that appears to me that everything is sitting correctly in terms of the elevation there, so that should all be good. Okay, I'm going to go back to my top of footing. So a couple other really quick things we need to do here is back to my plan. So let's work on positioning our two F3 footings. So if I'm looking at this here, I've got 1 foot 9 inches, and then from the outside of the wall here, I've got 8 foot 2 inches to the edge, and then from outside here to this outside edge is 5 foot 5. All right, I'm going to pull this over to my other screen so I can see those dimensions here. And what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to go back to my annotate command. I'm going to click aligned. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come from the center of that footing to the edge, and then from the outside of my wall over to the edge and to the edge, and then I'm going to pull back and end that dimension. And while I'm at it here, I'm going to go ahead and add a dimension from this point to the edge of my footing here, my F4 footing, and then based on my plan, it appears that that's being referenced off of the outside foundation wall on this side to that side here. So let me just show you what I'm basically done here is I just put in the dimension from this point over to here, and I've got these other dimensions in there. So now I will have the ability to place all those things in the correct locations. So remember, as we do this, we are moving objects. So to get these located in the right position, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select this first footing, and that is 1 foot 9 inches. This footing right here, I'm going to actually select it. I don't have a dimension to work off of there, so I'm just going to come up here really quickly to my line tool, and I'm going to align. I want to align that other footing to that edge, so you can see how I can click on that and align that very quickly. So now moving from this point, we have 8 foot 2 inches. And then the distance between these two is 5 foot 5 inches. Looking at our F4 footing, we've got 10 foot 5 inches. So again, I got to select what I want to move, and then I can go ahead and edit the measurement. So 10 foot 5 inches, and then we've got 5 foot 9 inches from the outside of the other wall. So that should now put those isolation footings in the correct location. I'm going to go ahead and delete those dimensions just for clarity purposes, because the next thing I want to show you here is how to modify line types. So at this point on a standard foundation drawing, we show our foundation wall using standard object lines. But the footing that's below a foundation wall in a T foundation system, we end up changing that to a hidden wall line type. So in Revit, they make this actually fairly simple to do. What we're going to do is we're going to come up here to the Modify tab. Looks like I was already on it. So right here by View, you'll see this Lineworks tool. Select that Lineworks tool, and that will activate our line style. And I'm going to select center line, the center line that's between the two brackets. Once I've done that, you can see my cursor is that like plus looking thing. And I'm going to come down here and I'm going to touch really close. I don't think I have to touch. I just got to come close to the edge of that footing, and you'll see it highlighted in blue. I simply now just click on the left mouse button, and you can see that my center line, and I told you wrong, that is not center line. I want that to be the hidden line style. But that's not a big deal. You can see I can come back to that center line and change that to my hidden line. And then all I do is just go around the perimeter where all the different lines need to be changed. And I will go ahead and make all of these footings look like a standard hidden line convention, as I was saying, as we use in our line types and plans. Okay, just about there. Okay, the other thing is, Again, I don't remember if I showed it on here correctly or not, but I did. But our isolation footings also should have those dotted lines or hidden lines. So you can go ahead and change those line styles all the way around. And once we have that, we should be good. Okay, so now the next thing I want to do, and this will be the last thing for this video, is I want to input the actual wood bearing wall right here. So to do that, I'm going to come back again to my architecture tab and go to wall. And I'm going to just look here really quickly and see what type of wall types we have. Okay, not much. I'm just going to basically come here to, I'll just select the generic 6-inch wall. I'm going to go ahead and click on the edit type, and I'm going to duplicate this. And on this duplication, I'm going to call this a 2x4 wood framed. Let's just call it a 2x4 wood pony wall. Just going to go ahead and say okay. And then I need to come right here where it says edit. And what I'm going to do right here is under material, I'm going to click right here where it says by category. This might take just a second to process. But once this processes, I'm going to select this little gray box. And what that's going to do is it's going to take me to a library of materials that I can select different material styles. So when it comes up, there's some pre-defined material types in there, and there's one that's going to be called, it is called softwood lumber. Okay, there we go. So here's our material browser. This is all done alphanumeric, and if I can make this go down, there we go. I'm going to come down to where I should find one that says softwood lumber. So softwood lumber, that's basically what our 2x material is made out of from a specification standpoint. And because we're doing a 2x4 wall, this wall thickness will actually be 3.5 inches because that's the actual width of a 2x4. So I have that done. I'm going to go ahead and say okay. Go ahead and say okay one more time. Last thing I need to do before I place this wall once again is go to your properties box and let's make sure that we are building this correctly. So, or we have the correct constraints. So we want this wall coming off of our footing. Let me just bring back this right here. So here's the center footing, and our bearing wall is resting right on the top of footing. So that is our base constraint. And in our case right here, we are going to make this wall not 20 feet tall. We want an unconnected top constraint, but this wall should actually measure 1 foot 11.5 inches. So key that in on the unconnected height. And now that we have that done, I'm going to come to the center line once again, and I'm going to click and I'm going to go to the other wall, and I'm going to go ahead and hit escape. Now I am going to go one last time and just double check to see if my center is correct. And you can see I have 12 foot, so I know the other distance would be 12 foot as well. Okay, so now that we have it to that point, we have all of our foundation walls, we have all of our footings, and we have that bearing wall. I'm going to go back to that 3D view right here so you can see essentially what that bearing wall looks like. So that'll conclude this video. On my next video, I will show you how to do the concrete piers that exist on the outside and the garage slab.